Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks a lot for coming back from the coffee break. Please feel free to move a bit forward if you don't hear well or because we are quite a small crowd. Welcome to this session on procuring high-quality NCS carbon credits. My name is Edith Kiss. I'm a Chief Investment Officer at Revalue Nature, and I will be your moderator today. And I'm joined with an excellent group of panelists. Next to me is Paulina Ponce de León, Managing Director and Partner at Boston Consulting Group. Next to her is Giulia Carbone, Director, Natural Climate Solutions Alliance at WBCSD, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And at the end is Todd Stevens, Executive Director for Conservation Solutions at Wildlife Conservation Society. So, welcome. Before we kick off, I just wanted to get a quick check. If you could raise your hands if you're currently buying nature-based carbon credits. Do we have any buyers in the room? A few. And then keep your hands up. And another question, would you pay a premium for high-quality nature-based carbon credits? Yay, thank you. So you know who to go to. Thank you. So we know that corporate climate action is key for reaching the 1.5 degrees target, and nature-based solutions represent 1/3 of the cost-effective mitigation potential. We have seen in the past years an exponential growth on the voluntary carbon markets, and nature-based carbon credits have been the biggest contributor to this growth. However, recently, we also have this segment of the market, nature-based solutions, has also come under a lot of fire, and recent investigative pieces by Guardian and other journalists have brought, I would say, this integrity into the mainstream. But of course, we know that it is not new, the integrity and quality issues, and the markets, including the standards, the project developers, technology providers, have been working for many years now to continuously improve the rules and keep pushing the bar higher. And I would also say that it's quite normal that for a market that is growing exponentially, we have a bit of dilution in quality, and so it's essential to keep the bar, the minimum safeguards, and the audit rigor higher and keep strengthened. I've personally spent my career 17 years in carbon markets, and I also would say that the RED Plus and NCS segment of carbon credits are, I think, one of the most scrutinized type of credits. And even more broadly, if you look at green bonds or sustainability-linked bonds, the MRV around those KPIs is, for example, far less rigorous than carbon credits, yet it's much less scrutinized. I guess that one of the reasons for that is because how we use these carbon credits, we use them for offsetting, and therefore it represents, obviously, if there is a misuse around them. So I think one of the main integrity issues is around the demand side, around the claims, and that needs to be really separated from the supply side issues, from the quality issues. And I'm quite glad to see that this new buyer's guide, which Paulina and Giulia will tell you a lot more about, is a very holistic one, and it does talk about the demand side and also the supply side, and gives very practical guidance to the corporates, to buyers who want to engage. So with that, I'd like to turn to Paulina. And BCG is a buyer of high-quality carbon credits. I would be very interested to hear about your experience on this journey when you were procuring. What were the challenges and takeaways, and what led you to the development of this guide for the market?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for being here. So I do work for the Boston Consulting Group. We're a large management consulting firm, and a couple of years ago we made a commitment to become net zero by 2030. Part of that includes having set science-based targets that are aligned with a 1.5 degree pathway, but we've also made a commitment to address our residual emissions, both through engineered and nature-based solutions along the way. And we've actually made a commitment to obviously purchase high-quality credits, and we estimate that the average cost of that, again, using that portfolio mix, is going to be about $80 a ton by 2030, and again, portfolio approach. There are many challenges along the way, but I will talk about ours, but also what we're seeing with our clients. And I think the biggest thing is that it's a very opaque market, and companies are they want to do the right thing. They don't always know how to do the right thing, and not every company has the resources that a BCG or a Salesforce of the world have to basically set up a whole team of carbon credit experts that can be doing the procurement and the purchases of the carbon credits. So we have developed these guide, which we're very proud to launch today, and it's been great. It's a great collaboration with the Natural Climate Solutions Alliance, with Giulia, with WBCSD, with the World Economic Forum, that focuses on basically demystifying the process for purchasing carbon credits. And a lot of it is about who has a right to buy. So what's the right way of incorporating the use of carbon credits into your climate strategy? And then what are the kinds of questions that you should be asking along the way to make sure, again, that you're not only that you're having an impact, but that you're managing any potential risks that could exist in the market in terms of how others are perceived. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I think we'll dive a little bit more into details and practical tips for buyers. But Giulia, turning to you, so you work at WEF and WBCSD with a lot of corporates, and so demand side is a key issue. So why is this guide? Why is it so important?
Yeah, so, well, it goes back to the reason why the NCS, the Natural Climate Solution Alliance, was launched over 2 years ago, was really to catalyze demand for high-quality natural climate solution carbon credits. So it has, this tag has two elements of it: catalyze demand, but also for something very specific, which is high-quality NCS. So our work, so the coalition brings together corporates purchasing credits, NGOs, and solution providers. All of you here are members, and we have a number of other members in the audience. We have, Everland, I've seen BP, I've seen actually EDF and Vera and ART. So the great idea is all these organizations are coming together because we believe that companies should purchase more, but more of something specific, which is a high quality NCS, where there goes the question is, what is a high quality NCS? So this guide was done, first of all, as a collaborative process. So it's, instead of taking 2 months in writing it, it took slightly longer. But the good thing is that it's really the collective voice of over 60 organizations that have contributed. It provides an umbrella to a lot of other initiatives. Todd will tell you a little bit more about some other specific guidance that has been recently developed as well. But really to support companies in this journey. We understand that we need to provide more awareness, but also education to companies to feel comfortable in making this purchase. We need this purchase because individual actions, net zero commitments, are absolutely a must, but they're not going to be sufficient. We need commitment beyond the individual space of a company. We need companies to go beyond that, and this is through the purchase of actions beyond value chain, but these actions have to be of high integrity, high quality. So we are also pushing a lot in this guide to understand what is the biodiversity gain and social contribution element, because we also refer to a lot of the existing processes such as ICBCM, so we don't repeat what is being done by other organizations. So ICBCM, as I said, CORSIA, but we dedicate a lot of space to what does it mean to be biodiversity positive, right, in terms of a project. So what questions could a company ask a project developer, an intermediary, about the project contribution to gains, right? So we are not talking about no harm. We are going beyond the no harm concept here, which is what an NCS should be.
Great, thank you. You touched upon it, so I just quickly follow on that. Indeed, we're still waiting for the ICBCM, for the VCMI, and all other lots of guidance. So how do you integrate them and avoid creating maybe more confusion or in the market?
Yeah, well, it could be really confusing for a company, and as Paulina said, for somebody who comes new and all this. I mean, I honestly have this experience on my own skin, because when I started this new position a year and a half ago, I opened the flood and all these acronyms came at me. It's like, who is who? So hopefully with this guide, we're providing also kind of a glossary about what are the different initiatives that a company should be aware of, right? A buyer should be aware of, and when, right? When they come in. So what we are saying also is, before you look at looking at a credit, if it actually delivers a biodiversity gains or a social benefit, first of all, they have to be high integrity from a carbon perspective. So that's the kind of a gate. If the project or program doesn't pass that gate, they shouldn't even consider purchasing. Just go back to your desk, and start again and look for other projects. And in order to do that, we are recommending the existing processes, which is CCQI, for example. We are recommending looking at CORSIA and ICVCM when they're going to issue the first program certificates and so on.
Great.
Yeah, maybe if I could just add something. It was very important for us to be building on what others are doing and not recreate the wheel. So the guide very clearly refers to all of these other existing processes and tries to close the gap where, especially from the biodiversity front, where there aren't none. But we expect that this is going to be something that continues to evolve as standards continue to evolve, because we know it's not a done deal. And so we are really integrating the whole ecosystem in that one place.
And in the meantime, while we're waiting, because I think one of the big questions in the market is that it's in a little bit in a limbo. We're waiting for all these standards. What would the guide's recommendation be? Can you start doing your own, or you have to just wait?
Oh, no, we don't want companies to wait, right? So right now, the funding that is going into nature-based solutions, or that's needed to unlock their potential, is not even a quarter of what's needed, right? There are estimates that say that we need about $700 billion by 2030 to really unlock the potential. We have about $150 billion that's going into that. Most of it is not even coming from the private sector. So we really need to be tapping into that financial bucket, to call it that way. And if companies wait, that's not going to happen. If we wait for the perfect, it's not going to happen. And I think we really need to help companies figure out how they can engage responsibly in this space, but also, in some ways, reward the risk that companies are taking, right? Because it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah, fully agree. So with that, I think, Todd, coming to you. So what does this guide mean for you from the project, from supply side? How do you perceive it? Does it create more burden or confusion, or you welcome it? Can you please tell a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I'm Todd Stevens. I work for the Wildlife Conservation Society here in New York City. And we are an NGO here with a mission of conserving wildlife in wild places, and a major project developer, as well as helping governments think about programs that they might adopt. For me, the guide, I know it's aimed in many ways at buyers. It's a very nice step-by-step guide about what you need to consider. It's holistic, it's comprehensive. I think for a project developer or someone thinking about the creation, I think it's very important to understand what a buyer's looking for and sort of all those different steps. And I'd say that I really appreciate the way that the guide builds on other things, because there are other things that we're going to have to think about. I was asked to speak about two. One, I think reading a guide like this will help you understand what VCMI and ICVCM are going to say. I don't think people should just jump in and go read that thing if they've never read anything before. It's very hard. It's very inside baseball, let's put it that way. I know, it makes you laugh. The second thing is that I wanted to sort of differentiate away what the guide is, because it builds on something, and I wanted to mention this, something that we worked on quite a bit, which is this TFCI, which is ask a question very much about high integrity tropical forest credits, because the guide says in some ways that it gets into is the additive of biodiversity and social, but doesn't get into some of the underlying. It relies on the certifications that exist. And if anyone's been reading the news the last 6 months, that's really what's been under question. And I would say, I would point people to the TFCI guide as complementary, because it fundamentally gets at this question. And far be it for me to say this, but it also hopefully solves this question that we have in the NGO world, and some of my colleagues are here, and I really appreciate ADF leading this process, that we were able to in some ways bury the hatchet between organizations who criticized each other about the different pathways that were there. So if you happen to be someone who's read the buyer's guide and wanted to know what jurisdictional red is and why projects and jurisdictions seem to be at odds but aren't, you should read TFCI. I really wish our colleague Juan Carlos was here, because one of the questions you will read is, how does creating sort of forestry carbon credits, especially in tropical forests, interact with indigenous land tenure? I would ask you to read our guide, because you have indigenous organizations and NGOs who typically fight about how each other's programs are not actually leading to the mountain, get together and imagine how those things could be complementary. One of the things I think you're going to see here, and I think we allude to it in the guide, is that you really can ask all these questions to these projects, and you should. You fundamentally should be asking these questions, and what these guides are trying to help you see are, what is the range of questions you can ask, and what are the answers that you should be querying? We should be helping you ask the right questions. We can't tell you what a perfect project is, but we can sure stop you from walking into something that you haven't done your due diligence on. So thanks.
No, that's a great point. So how, still a little bit from the project developer side, and I like to actually, would be interested to hear indeed how do you see this due diligence as a due diligence checklist and how to verify, or how does it work in practice. But just from the project developer side still, we know that we need to rebuild a bit of trust. There is a problem of trust right now. So what do you think project developers can do to increase the confidence for the buyers, and how can we create this gap between it's quite far where the buyer sits and where these projects are located?
Okay. Well, I will be the only project developer who's going to say that I think some of the rating agencies are really helping. That is not a popular view, I realize. But I actually think they're helping. I think they're providing another way for you to think about, because the certifications are binary, black or white. Are you certified as a creditor or are you not? And some of these rating agencies can at least allow you to start asking the kind of questions that I think the buyer's guide asks you to ask, is to differentiate and to look at how different projects accomplish what they're trying to do. That's one. Second thing is that I think these guides give you a sense about the methodologies that have been criticized, specifically Vera and others, and our trees just wait your turn until you have a bunch of projects and then you get some scrutiny. I think those methodologies are changing. I mean, I spent a nice time at lunch talking to someone about the afforestation methodologies. This changed to quite a lot. WCS is supporting Vera in rewriting the avoided deforestation module. My point is, I guess what I want to leave you with is that the certification bodies and the project developers are really trying to improve the quality as we go. And it's hard to remember that 10 years ago it was hard to do what we can do now.
Yeah.
It's very hard, unless you were there 10 years ago, to realize how much better remote sensing is, how much easier it is to access, and significantly greater protocols. Certainly we knew 10 years ago about consultation, but there are much more detailed free and prior informed consent consultation modules now than there were 10 years ago. And I think that we can hold projects to those standards. I don't know if that's helpful.
Right, no, that's very helpful. So Paulina, how still, these projects are highly specific, right? And they require a lot of expertise. So how do you use this guidance? How do you use these questions? And how do you know what you get back? Is it good or bad?
Yeah, well, part of what we're trying to do with the guide is make sure that companies can actually do these without having a PhD in how you buy a high quality carbon credit. And what we do is we outline a couple of different steps. So first is very much thinking about the strategy and like the team that you're going to be using to source these credits. Part of that is really outlining the criteria that each company is going to use to make decisions about what your portfolio looks like. We recommend that criteria is based on the evolving best practices that are out there, but also that you think about what's important to you. And that will probably depend on the sector that you're working in, as well as things that matter for your customers and for your staff. Once you've outlined that, and for example, BCG has, as with everything, we have a slide that outlines all of the different criteria that we care about. And we assess all of the projects against some of that. Part of it will be about the benefits that are created, nature, climate, people. Part of it will also be about the risks that are embedded in it. And so you can have a pretty diligent approach to evaluating the carbon credits. What the guide has is a set of questions, especially at the end, where we say, okay, these are the things that you should ask. And we get into things like, how are you ensuring equitable revenue sharing in the projects? How are you making sure, like what are the efforts that you're pursuing to make sure that you're maintaining or actually enhancing the ecosystem services that are associated with this project? And as Todd said, we have sample answers of what that looks like. I do want to say, I think part of the value is even just in companies asking those questions. And they are, I mean, the same way that companies are responding to investors asking the questions of what's your climate strategy, I suspect that project developers will need to be making sure that they can meet, that they're answering these questions in a credible way. And companies are willing to pay for that high quality. You asked that question at the very beginning. We're actually about to publish another study that has been looking at that question precisely. Are companies really willing to pay for high quality? And the answer is yes. And they want that information, and they will pay for specific attributes that are considered high quality. And so I think that's very good news. And to me, what that tells us is that we should be investing in developing those projects, and we shouldn't be cutting any corners.
That's fantastic news, because obviously with a very low price, buyers shouldn't be expecting all those additional benefits.
Exactly.
That's a hallucination. So going to Giulia, so how does the NCSA going to use this guide, and what can you say if you have some corporates maybe in the audience also online, how to again engage in this journey?
Yeah, so I think the guide is the beginning, in the sense that as going back to the aim of the NCS Alliance is to catalyze demand, right? So what we want is to reach out to all the companies that are currently sitting on that fence, looking down and say, should we invest or not? Should we go and play? You know, right now we have around 25 companies, members of the NCSA, in all of them already either purchasing or already quite advanced in the whole process. Those are not the companies that we are reaching out to. Those are the companies that are helping us to have a good sense of what the buyers like, you know, how the buyers think. But what we need to reach out to all those who are sitting on the fence and to convince them to purchase, and giving them the tools to make them more aware and educate them about the process so that they can make the case to their CFO, saying, we need to do more than setting our net zero target. We need to go beyond that and add and purchase high quality NCS. So two things. One is we are going to launch at what we call the NCS Procurement Hub. This is something that we're going to basically start hopefully this spring and have a proper launch in New York, hopefully in September during New York Climate Week, which is going to be a platform for businesses where they can have peer-to-peer learning, discuss with business, and have sessions with the NCSA experts to understand what are educational sessions, clinics, chats, everything, just to give them that kind of sense of comfort that others are going through the same thing and learn from others. And then a second thing that we want to do, and is something that we have discussed a lot, it is also how do we pass on this message about high quality that we are telling businesses engage on to project developer, right? So we need to close the loop. Right? We have the carbon crediting program, they're developing great standards, but we also want all the project developer out there to be able to start understanding what is high quality, what is expected from them. And I would say, actually, even more importantly, communities that are being those that some of the project developers go and ask them, hey, come on board, give us, can we work on your land to understand, first of all, what are their rights, and understand what is high quality, right? What kind of things they should expect this project developer to do. So I think that's what we want to make sure that we close the loop, because there's no point to say, demand, you should go out and ask these questions, and then if the supply is limited. Right now, we know all the great players, but if we want to scale to the level that we need in terms of also supply, we need many more actors in the game.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good point. That's indeed a problem for the buyers, that they are at the end of the chain, so they can't influence the design. I still think they have a really big power how they purchase the price, and also the preferences, which type of credits, and whether they are going for those high biodiversity or high community or gender type of credits. So they have a very important role. But at the end, we need to make sure they can buy from credits, and so very pleased to hear that the guidance also, you're looking at closing the loop on the project developers, and we also have a session tomorrow and the integrity well.
Okay.
We'll go discuss about the methodologies, the standards, and the project developers' role in this whole cycle and circle. So yeah, that's really important to hear. And indeed, I did forget to mention that we were supposed to have Juan Carlos Hintiat from COICA, coordinator of indigenous organizations for the Amazon River Basin here today. Unfortunately, he's not here. He'll make it tomorrow for our other integrity panel. But maybe just to emphasize those, because I think, Todd, you mentioned it's super important. Obviously, for these projects, the indigenous people's rights, and they should be the core of the project. So maybe just if you could, each of you reflect a little bit, what do you think is the minimum standard in this respect? And more importantly, also, how can you verify, or how, again, the buyer sitting far away, well, how can you make sure that it actually happens, and 2 years later, you don't find out that something was actually not done?
So this is, well, first of all, there is the entry point, what we say is the do no harm, and there are a number of minimum questions that need to be, let's say elements that need to be in place, which is about the rights of the people, and the rights of the people to say no, right, or to confirm their participation. And so this is what the free, prior, informed consent process, for example, to make sure that the land rights are clear. But what we are saying is that this is part of the entry in the conversation, but a natural climate solution should bring more than that, should actually generate benefits for people. It's not just about having the safeguards. How do you verify that? This is where the problem lies with, we also recommend very much in the guide saying, use rating agencies. They're great because they give you additional, information. However, most of the rating agencies focus on the environmental data, and the verification of the social aspects is much more complex. In my understanding, also because the way we have positioned this question is not a black and white saying, use them as a checklist. If the project doesn't go, don't engage anymore, but is engage with them in a conversation. So there is also opportunity to actually ask for some documentation, for some, one of the questions we ask is that to make sure that there is a regular monitoring of the social benefits as well as the biodiversity benefits. So the developer should have in hand, a regular report that shows how they're collecting the data for the specific indicators. But this is also where I hope, in a way, this guide will become obsolete in a few years, when there are going to be third-party processes that are going to cover all the aspects we are talking about, and then a company can go out and then be comfortable that that specific process or that specific standard has included the carbon aspect, the biodiversity aspect, and the social aspect. Right now, it's a process, and that's how we are, hoping we are sending the signal that this is what the demand should look for.
Yeah, fully agree. Yeah, fully agree that we are at a very crucial point, and we need to work on towards that. But hopefully in the future, it will be more like a flavor. You can still choose the flavors of the credits, but hopefully they will all have a minimum high minimum standard. Is there anything else you Todd or Paulina?
I mean, I'll say something really quick. The first, it's what I would say is you should probably look first at the benefit sharing. I think watching where the money goes in a project or a program is probably your first clue about these things. And if you think about how the determinations were made about where the money is going. So I think it's important, and those two things are really important. It's something I learned a lot from Juan Carlos, to be honest, being on these panels, is that the idea is not just sort of that there's a wave at indigenous land tenure or titles, but instead there's a decision making that was incorporated into the idea of the project. And I want to say, in terms of project developers who would have problems answering that, if we want a premium in the market, you should be having answers to these questions. Yes. They are not illegitimate questions. They're important questions. They're hard questions, but they should feel quite comfortable answering those questions, and you should not feel strange asking for that. Because if you can talk about the ways in which local communities and indigenous peoples were part of the decision making about how the project was developed and makes decisions, then you'll learn a little bit about the project, even though it will seem less clean, more messy, take longer, cost more. But that is the idea, to sort of produce a higher price. I want to say one quick thing about price, and I'll get away from this. Carbon markets don't function the way all markets function. You might get a better raincoat if you said, I will pay this much for this raincoat and it has these kinds of specifications, and then you widely put that out there, and you may get a cheaper raincoat. Changing the economic development patterns of developing countries, tropical forest countries, is not like buying raincoats. It is possible, and if you read the scholarship that brought us all these ideas about how we could actually provide a climate mitigation solution, those analyses said, look what we could do for $25 a ton. Look what we do for $50 a ton. Look what we do for $100 a ton. I realize that is not the way market-based economics usually work. But market-based economics are not actually about solving a market failure usually, an environmental market failure. So I guess I'd put that out because I happily get paid by an NGO right now, that if price goes up in this market, it is not a failure. It might be a success.
I tell you,
Now
also
it's got to have integrity, it's got to have impact, but the amount of mitigation that can be accomplished at higher prices is significantly greater, and I guess I'd stand by that predictive science.
Great, thanks a lot.
What?
I agree. I agree with what you said.
What? So the three of us know each other, so if everyone has questions, you will get the real answers from us.
Fantastic, that's what we want. But just holding back your thoughts on the benefit share. So I guess the $1 million question that has been on the market and nobody has come up with an answer, probably there's a good reason why, but does the guide say anything about what's the right level of revenues that should go back to the carbon right holders? Or how do you think about it? How companies should think about that?
Yeah, so that's a very important. First of all, in fact, in the guide we talk about revenue sharing and not just benefit sharing to make sure that it's also clear. These have also to be financial revenues for the communities and not just benefits, because the risk if we say just benefits, then we have, of course, there are a lot of good important benefits, such as education and other investments in the community. But we also have to make sure that the community feels that is actually getting some monetary returns for the efforts they're putting in there. The amount, we have had lots of discussions with some of the, especially indigenous groups that we have worked with. And at this stage, we haven't put a fixed number. And this is really unfortunate because I think it's not. I think we were not ready, and one of the spin-off conversations that we are going to have, there are a couple of more that we discussions that came up that we said, okay, we can't come up with the right solution, but we should have a further discussion as an NCS alliance is going to be that. Can we give more guidance on what we think is also what companies would be willing to see and willing to pay for, because it's, that's also the part. But as you said, the more it goes back to the value goes up, and then at a certain point, what's the limit of what is the, potential, amount that a company would be willing to pay, the willingness to pay for that.
I would add two things. So one is I actually think, to your point before, Todd, the process by which these decisions get made is incredibly important. So yes, we're looking for equitable revenue sharing, and we're looking for how that was actually defined in collaboration with communities. So no, we're not saying pay $20 a ton, $30 a ton. I think we're saying ask the question and make sure that this has been an inclusive process that involves all stakeholders. That's one piece. And then the other thing that I do want to say is companies are willing to pay for that higher quality, right? So the low prices that we're seeing in a lot of these projects today, it's underpriced. They need to go up. We need to make sure that that investment is there, and companies are going to be willing to do that. Go ahead, Todd.
I mean, just quickly, there are a lot of hands out when you actually are on the cusp of delivering a high quality project. Who would like to benefit from that? Here's what I'd say, and it deals with, I think, some of the equity issues. The project should be focused on effectiveness. Mm-hmm. And the idea that sharing is a matter of equity instead of effectiveness is wrong. I think you should be doing both at the same time. If you're not equitable, you're going to have a very hard time in the places at least we work, and many, I think, is some of the deforestation frontiers, if you're not actually employing and working with the people who are going to make local decisions. That doesn't mean that government doesn't get a share, but I think effectiveness helps you understand if you look at someone's benefit sharing. I guess the second thing is that, as someone who used to work in the financial sector, you also might look at the share of returns that go to investors. I think you have to look at that because there is a finite pie when you buy a credit that is going to be shared. And I sincerely think there are different models out there whereby certain investors benefit in different ways. And that, I would ask that when you look at that, you should think about, obviously, if something's financially structured to provide more effectiveness at reducing deforestation on the ground, that's great. If something is structured to maximize returns by people, I think you should scrutinize that.
Yeah, fully agree. I think the difficulty is that, A, the projects are very different, but also the structures, the investors, buyers, they are different and not necessarily comparable. So I look forward to that discussion with the NCSA maybe to crack that nut in the coming months. I also would like to encourage people to submit questions online. We have one, and then I will also open up for the audience. So I think there's a question from Cameron on the chat. Around biodiversity. The living carbon budget, i.e. biodiversity, is key within the credit system and needs detailed holistic measurement and monitoring. How do communities, companies and organizations connect with investors to implement biodiversity net gain locally and afford tools to measure and monitor biodiversity? So I think we did have some very interesting panels before talking about the new MRVs, but if you want to comment maybe on that, and especially I guess again, affordability, somebody have to front those costs as well, which is still a big issue.
I'll let you, I'll say one thing and then I'll pass it on to you, Todd.
That's good.
I think one element that we need to, at least the NCS Alliance, I think we are all on the same page. I hope I can speak on behalf, is that we are trying to start looking at these not as, going back to your point about effectiveness, these are conservation and development projects that also deliver carbon mitigation.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's not the other way around. These are not carbon projects that, by chance, we also have biodiversity and gains and social benefits. No, the effectiveness then is what actions, interventions have, that deliver biodiversity, deliver social gains, and then they're designed in a way that they are financed through the carbon. That's, I think, is really, really important. So then biodiversity, even if it's not about creating, in that particular case, biodiversity credits, but who knows? And the question of stacking is really, really important because it could create another layer of financing, right? But let's not leave that question for another panel. Then biodiversity becomes a core component of the project. It's not like the icing on the cake, you say that, or cherry on the cake.
Yeah, sure.
Is the core components. The intervention is a conservation and a development project that also then generates. So then your monitoring has to include biodiversity, has to include social, because that's how you know you're going to be effective.
I like sprinkles. Just like sprinkles in the cake.
All right, I'll do sprinkles.
So look, here's what and sit back. We now exist in a supply-constrained world with regard to carbon credits. It's not a demand-constrained world right now. What I'd say in terms of this question of affordability from the perspective is that the people in this room have some agency in that issue. Look, there is a robust market right now for investing in carbon projects that are investable in the typical way the capital markets think about that idea. There are buyers. What there are not is enough projects that are high quality. So I would ask that we do it in our guide, this buyer's guide. I think we are saying that people can go the extra mile and think about forward finance. And that's a viable model for people to think about. And that's, if you want high integrity credits, that not just buying them is not enough.
Yeah.
That the system would have been producing these great outcomes. It's not producing those outcomes on its own. That there's the capital markets, the system we have is produced by our current global capital markets. If we want the system to be different, the global capital markets have to act differently to kind of create the world they want.
Good luck with that. Yeah, I do like and I fully agree, Giulia, that your point is so crucial. You say biodiversity should be the core, but it's not, unfortunately. So I think, one thing to encourage buyers to look out for that. And there are some opportunistic people who just look at the carbon, how to maximize, and I think that's the key, how to spot that, how to differentiate and get the developers also to shift the mindset if they are not there yet, right? So that's where we have to collectively work, because I agree, it's a design issue. If you have that mindset, you get right the biodiversity. But if you just want to have carbon and plant some monoculture plantations and want to get some upside, well, you know what happens. So maybe just opening up, because I know I think we have 5 more minutes probably. We started 5 minutes late. So is there any question in the audience?
Here it comes.
Here it comes.
Maybe.
Are we having Mike Gate Part 2?
Is it working? No. Great session. Thank you very much. You've talked a lot about the guidelines for project developers and ensuring that there's high integrity and authenticity within the credits available. Have you given consideration to how the project developers should be thoughtful about where the credits are being distributed to, that everybody's playing their part in a real-world decarbonisation?
Very good question. I love that question. So I'll repeat it because, I repeat it for the online audience. So, yes, so there is a lot of discussion around that. So the question is, what about the buyers? What's their role? And there is a risk for high-quality project developers to sell their credits to someone who is not using the credits responsibly, right? And then they, again, that was my initial comment on the demand side quality. Is there any considerations in the guidance around that?
Yeah, so in the guide we talk about claims, and so we talk about this in two ways. First is set your strategy, and therefore there we clearly say, well, this is the NCS Alliance position, that we see the use of voluntary carbon credits as an additional measure in the transition to net zero. So a company that has implemented their targets on a yearly basis, they will have unabated emissions. So that's the portion they could align with carbon credits. It's not to replace emission reductions that they should take on a yearly basis according to their targets. So now therefore, that's how we say, make sure that your strategy is aligned with that. And then when we talk about claims, we also recommend companies to make sure that when they talk about how many carbon credits they purchase, they have to always report also what is their annual abatement, right? How much they have abated for their scopes and what was their target. So it's very transparent what's their emission, how much they have abated that year, and how much they have purchased, and possibly what was their target. We are looking forward to VCMI, the Voluntary Carbon Market Integrity Initiative, to also come out with their claim code of practice, which should help businesses also to be able to make claims, which to me is the way you can create a commercial incentive for more companies to actually purchase credits, because then they will be able to claim. I keep thinking about something on the package of chips that my children buy is like, then they will actually know if the process for producing them has followed this hierarchy, right? And there are plenty of hierarchies, but this one is the decarbonization hierarchy, so that a company is actually investing carbon credits in addition to other things and not as a replacement. So I think word matters in this conversation, so we have to be very precise every time we talk about the voluntary carbon market, and we say it has to be additional and not as a replacement to decarbonization.
Yeah, fully agree. Can I poke a little bit further on that? So I think one of the challenges for developers, and I'm sure you'll agree, Todd also, that how do we verify that? Has anybody started reporting those for example, from the NCSA members, and is there something that we can do encourage? Because I think one of the challenge for project developers is how do I verify? What do I look for? If I don't have an army of research analysts, how do I know that company is actually on that trajectory?
I mean, that's a good question. Maybe let me step here. So we definitely need high integrity supply, and we do need high integrity demand. I think in many ways, the guardians of the world are doing that work for companies. There will be, investors will be asking questions, regulators will be asking questions about how carbon credits are being used in companies' climate strategies, as will consumers and company's own staff. I do want to say, however, that companies need to communicate very responsibly about this, and I think transparency is king or queen, or both. But we're all learning, right? Sometimes we talk about these things as if we've been doing it for ages and we already know the answer, but we've never faced a challenge like this before, and we are learning, we are getting better. I do think that communicating failure is going to be as important as communicating success, because otherwise we're not going to be making progress. And there was a question about greenwashing earlier today. I think we need to be very careful with when we talk about greenwashing. Some companies are really doing their best and sometimes not getting it right, but they're being open and transparent about it and improving the next year ahead. There are other companies, there are other companies that might not be doing the right thing because they don't know, right? But we need to talk about it, and we can't paralyze the private sector just because they're afraid of how they're going to be portrayed in the media.
And I tell you, the problem I see, actually the biggest problem I see right now as the NCS Alliance is the reverse. Companies that actually are doing the right thing, they're doing all the decarbonization, purchasing credits, and as NCSA, we have this program that we want to use them as testimonials to inspire others. A lot of them say thank you, but we prefer not to talk about it anymore because we are scared of being attacked. So we got to the point that we have, if they report correctly, they're doing it in addition, but they're afraid of speaking publicly about it. Yeah. Because they, as I said, they will.
So probably we'll also need to educate some other stakeholders on this market. So we'll continue the education process. I don't know if you have, I think we're running out of time, but I'll just maybe ask for one, in a few words, just going around the speakers, what would be your 3-word, 5-word advice for corporates in this journey?
High quality tropical forest carbon credits exist. Greenwashing is bad.
Read the buyer's guide. So there is actually my colleagues from Vera has kindly gave us some little space on their table. There are some very nice postcards with the QR code, and then I'm sure we can post it on the website. But it gives you an overview. Another really important element of the guide is portfolio. Don't be fixed on one type of NCS credits. Think portfolio and we explain why. Certain things are available today are important today. So for example, conservation of forests, but other things might require a little longer. Therefore, you need to invest today.
Perfect. Portfolio.
I was going to go for portfolio. It's and, right? It's avoidance and removal. It's tech and nature-based. It's abatement and carbon credits. It's really just not one.
That's a fantastic thought to finish on. So thank you very much. Please give a round of applause.